Do you guys have any questions? Do you guys have any questions? Hello, Lucas. Hello, Lucas. Hello, Lucas. All right, first question. All right, first question. Okay, so this thing's on a delay, so you just gotta get used to it. So, the first thing that someone asked was, did abolitionists help or hurt the reform movement? Okay, so this thing's on a delay, so you just gotta get used to it. So, the first thing that someone asked was, did abolitionists help or hurt the reform movement? Okay, so this thing's on a delay, so I don't know why I'm having that. The first thing that someone asked was, did abolitionists help or hurt the reform movement? I don't know why I'm having that echo there. So we'll have to just deal with the echo in the background. I'm not really sure why it's happening. So real quick, I think that you can make the argument that they both helped and hurt the. I'm not really sure why it's happening. So real quick, I think that you can make the argument that they both helped and hurt the. I'm not really sure why it's happening. So real quick. The reform movement. So let's talk about how it helped. It helped the reform movements because it gave attention. I don't think that was the question, though, right? It was help or hurt abolition. So the radical abolitionists hurt the cause. I think that you can make the argument that they both helped and hurt the cause. First, they helped the cause, obviously, because people like Garrison and the radical abolitionists, they were able to bring attention to the cause of. Remember, the thing about Garrison that's important is uncompensated emancipation. So mute your computer. All right, muting my computer. Okay. Do we still have the echo? Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right. So going back to that. So did they help or hurt? One thing they did was that they definitely helped the movement. They brought attention to the movement. They energized the movement. They were the ones who were like Garrison was sending out the Liberator. A lot. They were able to pursue their cause in a more vigorous way than they had before. Remember, the difference between 1830s abolitionists and beyond, and before that was the 1830s abolitionists and beyond, the radical abolitionists, the Garrisonians. They were all about using the masses of people, going directly to the people to create radical change, right? And if you think about any reform movement that has any success in America, it's when they go out into the streets and the grassroots and the people themselves get involved. The legal processes very rarely have that positive effect. How do they hurt? Well, what they were asking for was unconstitutional. What they were asking for went against the ideas of the rights of property. So many people believe that they were agitators, terrorists. They were creating they were creating a problem, an issue that was never going to be resolved. And the whole idea behind before 1830s was you had to be quiet about the issues of slavery. So they were bringing it out into the open. They were constantly agitating over it. And if you look at what happened, they were the critics of the radical abolitionists were right. You know, they did bring about the Civil War. In a lot of ways, you can point to the radical abolitionists as the cause of the war, right? They agitated. I mean, John Brown is a classic example of that radical abolitionist. So it starts with Garrison in the 1830s and Walker right before that, and it leads to John Brown down the road. Are we good? Watch it, Bullard. I'm a moderator too. I'll kick you right off this. Always, even got to start with me, and I'm home. I'm getting abused, and I'm home now. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about that. The causes and impact of the war. Well, the two causes of the war definitely would be the impressment and seizure of American shipping on the Atlantic by the British, and the belief that the British were helping the Indians in the West. So those are the causes. You can say that because New England doesn't vote for the war for the most part, that this impressment and seizures was not something that they considered important. They thought it was more like the cost of doing business. They did not want to give up their number one trading partner. But Westerners and Southerners, the war hawks like Henry Clay and the rest, they wanted the war, and they got their war. The impact is so important, guys. You got to go back over those notes real quick. Make sure you understand that, especially for the AP exam at the end of the year. But the impacts includes the rise of American nationalism, and as a result of that nationalism, you also have the development over time of the sectional divide that occurs. You have the market revolution as a result. The Andrew Jackson becomes a American hero. That's going to be obviously important into the 1820s and 1830s. So the war has a huge impact on the economy, society, obviously, because the market revolution has all those societal changes, and politically, you have the one-party system, the end of the Federalists, the era of good feelings, all the things we talked about in that period between 1814 and 1824 as a dividing or unifying period. All right. All right, market revolution. Good question. All right, let's go through that real quick. When you talk about the market, right, one of the things you got to remember about the market revolution is the economic changes. So think of it this way. Before the market revolution begins, you have, it's more of a producer society. Everyone makes what they need. After, you're going to be more of a consumer society. You go out and buy what you need. So that you're going to need money. You're going to need to, there's going to be manufacturing. There's going to be factories. Not like the second part of the Industrial Revolution, right, where you have these massive factories. These are more like textile factories, small barn-sized factories. You're going to go. So now people are producing. I mean, yeah, people are consuming as opposed to producing. It's not as self-sufficient. It's a more national economy. So that's the economic changes that occur. The social changes. All right, let's talk about that. First of all, you're going to have the rise of the middle class. There's going to be managers, accountants, lawyers. They're all going to be the guys who are going to do all that kind of work in these new factories. So you had a working class of people. You had the middle class, who were the managers and the accountants and the lawyers and then you had those who own the factories. Also, you're going to have the impact it has on women. Two impacts, right? One is some of the women end up in the factories, right? Like the little factory girls. And the other group, and others, not just, they don't all go into the workplace. Some of them are going to be pushed into the homes, right? And we talked about with the cult of domesticity. So you're going to have some are moving into the workplace and some are going back into the home. So that's the impact it has on women. On slaves, you can say the market revolution has a positive impact on the slave, right? Because the radical abolitionists come about as a result of the market revolution. And again, I know we've gone over that chart a million times, like in class and in review, but the idea is that the market revolution creates all these changes, and amidst those changes, you have that second great awakening with Charles Finney and those awakeners, and the idea that they wanted to reach perfection in society, and along with the transcendentalists and their focus on the individual, all those kind of things swirling around, and that busts out into reform. So you can kind of talk about the market revolution with respect to developing into the reform movement. Politically, you see the rise of two political parties at this time, right? The Democratic Party, originating with Andrew Jackson, and the Whigs as a result of Andrew Jackson's rise to power. The Whigs are industrialists for the most part. They're mutualists. They believe everyone has to work together to make the society better. They want more internal improvements and so on and so forth. So that's how you can go about the impact of the market revolution. Why are all these people asking about European history on this thing? Stephanator. Describe. No, I'm not doing that one. Okay. Stephanator. What important events are associated with the Adams presidency? Listen, when you think about Adams, the most important thing, obviously, is the Alien Sedition Acts. Well, what led to the Alien Sedition Acts? The French Revolution, right? 1789. They are radicalized, and Adams does not want to see the radicalized French Revolution come to America. So what does he try to do? He's trying to stifle the opposition, those who are against him and his efforts to stay out of the war in Europe, to reject the principles of the French Revolution. Most of the people who are in favor of the French Revolution happen to be Democratic Republicans. He creates the Alien Sedition Acts to slow the growth and power the opposition down, and we talked about how that was a violation of the First Amendment. He believed it was a national security act, right? He was trying to protect the fragile republic from collapse. He thought all this, the opposition was dangerous. Remember, we also talked about the reaction to the Alien Sedition Acts was the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions and the doctrine of nullification, which is going to come back when we talk about Andrew Jackson. That's pretty much what you have to know about the Alien Sedition Acts. Also remember, they were really unpopular. They were used against the opposition, so that's important. They were very unpopular, and it helped Jefferson get elected in 1800. You can rewatch it, guys. I think the way it works is it'll be archived on the YouTube channel. So if you need to watch pieces of it, well, I gotta go back. Wait. I'm missing some people here. So we did the Adams presidency. The political impact again is. Hold on a second. I gotta let this dog out. All right, so the political impact is the two-party system, the Democrats and the Whigs. Okay, and the Whigs are like mutualist, all right? They believe in it. Like, think about the Democrats. Think about Jackson. It's always us against them. When you think of the Whigs, it's always we together. We can do this, and they're much more industrialist, economically motivated, not as motivated by the other issues of the day. All right, and the changing role of American women from the American Revolution to the Civil War. I think that's an important topic, obviously, and I would just do it by period, right? So if you think about the period before, we're talking about the American Revolution, so from the American Revolution on, well, women, much like African Americans, are going to be impacted by the words of the Declaration of Independence, right? When we talked about Abigail Adams and the, remember the ladies letter, right? If you're going to claim your independency, remember the ladies in the new government. We know that they didn't get any of their rights, but we've talked about that. Does it have to be immediate for it to be successful? The idea that those ideas are out there and they're grasping them and they're going to fight for those goals in the future. So I think it's important to understand that even though they don't get it at the time, they're going to begin to fight for it. Also, that comes out of the American Revolution. You have the idea of Republican motherhood, right? That these the new republic needs mothers to teach the children, the men of that age, the boys of that age, to become good Republican citizens with a little R, to understand civic virtue and the like. So the idea of Republican motherhood comes out of that period. So then that period, we kind of go up until 1800, and then from there, 1800 to 1848. So what happens in that period of time to American women? Well, one thing that happens is economically, women are essential parts of the economic life of most every family in America. All right, because they're getting up in the morning and they're feeding the animals and they're working in the fields and they're making the clothes. They're doing all the things that producers would do in an economic situation like that, right? In a self-sufficient economy. But as time goes on, right, and we talk about the market revolution changing things, as market revolution changes things, it also changes things for American women. American women are not going to be producers as much anymore. They're going to be the consumers, especially those in the middle class. Not every American woman. When we talk about the cult of domesticity, remember, it's not every single American woman involved in that. All right, it's a segment of the population, and over time it might grow, but it's mostly middle class, upper middle class women who no longer have to make the items. They can go and buy them, and once that happens, that's where you get that idea of the cult of domesticity, the idea of the mom in the home, taking care of the house, taking care of the children, educating the kids, and so on. But there's still a large group of American women who are working in the fields, in the homes, and so on. However, there are young American girls who end up moving down into the cities, and especially with respect to Lowell, right, with the Lowell factory mills in Massachusetts, working as factory workers. So there's women moving into the workplace, there's women retreating into the homes, there's some women getting an education. So you're seeing the market revolution have somewhat of an impact on American women in a sense, right? And so when you think about 1800 to 1848, I think it's important to concentrate on the cult of domesticity and the Lowell factory mill. And then finally, you have the women's rights movement that comes out of the Great Awakening, Transcendentalism, the antebellum reform movements, right? You have Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and these American women who meet in Seneca Falls at the Declaration of Sentiments, fighting for the right to suffrage, all happening at this period of time. The other thing that I wanted to say about that was that that women are going to be involved in all those reform movements, right? You have Dorothea Dixon and the mentally ill. You have women involved in the abolitionist movement, women involved in the transcendental movement. So women are going to be in temperance movement. They're going to be essential to all those reform movements because it makes sense, right? Many of these middle-class women, they're no longer producers, they're consumers, they're in the cult of domesticity, but they still have that energy to go out and do something. So they become reformers. And then, and they're very important in the abolitionist movement. And many of these American women leave the suffrage movement, leave the women's rights movement to move into the abolitionist movement and fight for the freedom of the slaves. So that's a brief overview of what we're talking about with respect to American women. The head right system, that was, for every laborer you brought over, you could get 50 acres of land. So that's how they promoted the idea of indentured servitude before slaves in the 1680s. The idea of the Navigation Act, just to remember, before 1763, the Navigation Acts were not enforced. That's the period of salutary neglect. After 1763, they're going to be enforced. Just again, the Navigation Acts were the laws that set up the mercantile system. I talked about rewatching that. I believe so. You can click back on it. I think it's going to be archived once we're finished. You want to see the dog? Abby. Abby, come here. Come here. Get up here. Come on. Come on. Jump up. This is Abby. She's soaking wet because she went out in the rain. The dog loves Lincoln. Trevor? Of course she does. But I leave my Lincoln stuffed animal behind her head so she doesn't gobble it up. That's a great question about specific dates noted by memory. I mean, I don't think you need to know that by this test, but it's kind of important to understand like where things fall in history, right? So, stop it. 1607, you have Jamestown. 1680s, right? You have the introduction of slaves. What other date would be? 1754 to 1763 in the French and Indian War. 1763, the end of solitary neglect. 1776, obviously, the Declaration of Independence. 1800 is a good one because that's Jefferson's election. And 1824, maybe, the corrupt bargain. And then I guess you go to 1860 and Lincoln's election. Remember the ladies? That was Dorothea, That was Abigail Adams's letter. She writes to her husband about, don't forget the rights of women when you're writing your new set of laws. And we talked about it 100 times in class, guys. The idea that the Declaration of Independence and the ideas of the Revolution had a ripple effect. All the groups that had these kind of bonds of higher, elevated people and lower people, maybe like we've talked about teachers in schools, right? Teachers and students. The students now wanted their independency, right? They wanted their rights. So all these bonds that held society together previously that are now wiggling loose or wiggling a little bit, I guess you can say, and the founders had to deal with that. And she was saying, what about American women? Yeah, baby, Garrison. It's my dude. Thomas Jefferson is not alive. Jordan. Is the test hard? I don't think it's particularly hard. I think you're going to find the multiple choice to be easier than the classroom multiple choice. But I think it's going to be hard in that writing an essay from, without me kind of guiding you along is going to be difficult for some people, but you're going to have to be ready for that. There's only 28 multiple choice questions. I think when you think about Jackson, right, you got to think about, there's a question here, was Andrew Jackson King Andrew or Here the Common Man? I think when you think about Jackson, think about each event and whether or not you could argue it being King Andrew or Here the Common Man, right? Indian removal defies the court. The court decided that Indian removal was illegal. He does it anyway, acting as a king. But the land that was going to be used was for the common American citizen, right? And he was following the Indian Removal Act, so he was following the law. So if you look at it that way, he's a hero of the common man. Nullification, right? King Andrew, I'm gonna send troops down there to collect the tariff. Common man, he's trying to keep the union together. He thought it was good for the common man. The bank, well, that's easy, right? King Andrew, because he vetoes a bank after multiple Congresses, multiple presidencies, and the court had decided it was all good. He says, no, it's not good, acting as a king. Here the common man, they hated the bank. So, anything you think about with respect to Andrew Jackson, think about how you could make the argument either way. Did that one. The Articles of Confederation, just remember, they were the first form of government, the first constitution written after the Declaration of Independence as an effort to kind of limit the control of the national government. It's replaced by the Constitution, let's just say that. If you have the time, will you please review the history of political laws, specifically the transformations to 1800 to 1860? All right, so I'm going to talk about the history of the political parties. It's hard without my board. I like to do that diagram, but 1800 to 1860. So 1800, you have two political parties, the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists. Jefferson wins that election. You have the War of 1812 under Monroe. Under Madison. And you have, at the end of that war in 1814, the collapse of the Federalist Party because of the Hartford Convention. They were seen as disloyal because they were talking about secession. And so the Federalists kind of die out, and you have one political party for the most part from 1814 to 1824. Right? And that party is the Republican Party. And that party fractures in the election of 1824. They run 4 candidates. Jackson wins the popular vote. Jackson wins the electoral vote, but he doesn't have a majority. And as a result, the House of Representatives picks John Quincy Adams to be president. Adams becomes president. Jackson's supporters call it the corrupt bargain because eventually Henry Clay becomes Secretary of State. And the Jacksonians start to form their own political party, the Jacksonian Democrats. So now in 1828, you have the Democrats and the Republicans. Over time, the Republicans begin to call themselves Whigs. So you have two parties, the Republicans and the Whigs. The Whigs eventually collapse after the Kansas-Nebraska Acts because so many of the anti-slavery Whigs are not in favor of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. They're sick of compromising. They leave the party. The party collapses. And in the ruins of the Whig Party, you have the rise of the Republican Party, the party that will nominate Lincoln in 1860. All right. The principles and impacts of the Second Great Awakening. Well, the principle of the Second Great Awakening with Charles Finney is this idea of perfectionism, right? If you can become perfect in your own life, you can ask that of other people, you can expect that of other people, and then eventually you can make your society perfect. So Finney is the kind of the architect, or not the architect, but he's the leading voice in the Second Great Awakening. And the Transcendentalists, they were for self-reliance, individualism, the idea that, I don't want to say individualism, but the importance of the individual, and any institutions that kind of thwarted your rise to your full potential should be fought against, right? So slavery is one, and many of those Transcendentalists become ardent radical abolitionists. And that's a response to the changes that are occurring in the market revolution. And the Second Great Awakening and the Transcendentalism put together, that gives rise to the reform movements. I do have Abe Lincoln on my wall. Exactly. Watch your mouth. Can't tell you what the essay's on. I am old. We did that. We did the Andrew Jackson, King Andrew, Hero of the Common Man one. So yeah, might have to, when we're done, you might have to click on it and see if you can rewind. There's only one essay, but there's two choices. I don't know who Cheddar Zilla is. No. Monroe's presidency. I guess the Monroe Doctrine. Well, he's the president during the era of good feelings. So the Monroe Doctrine, I guess, is the one thing they may ask about. And hold on one second. I got to figure out what's going on here. Okay. And remember, the Monroe Doctrine was kind of us reaching out a little bit, right? We're growing up a little bit. So we're trying to keep the Europeans out of the Western Hemisphere. We don't want them returning after the Latin American reform movements. The Latin American independence movements. Monroe makes this speech. He says, "Hey, we want to be the leaders of this part of the world. Europe, you can have the Eastern Hemisphere. We're going to have the Western Hemisphere, not in an imperialistic way, but as leaders of that part of the world." It's not that important, the Monroe Doctrine, at that time, but it is important, much more important later on, when we get to the 20th century. Whoa. Okay, we got that one. There's one essay, but you have two choices. You pick from two. And there's two short answer questions with three choices. Treaty, was the antebellum reform successful? Oh. I'd have to say abolition was. I'd have to say women's rights was. I think they were all eventually successful. At that time, mixed reviews, but most of them were successful in the long run. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, yeah, baby, best treaty in the world. Just remember that the treaty gave us the Mexican cession and all the problems that are going to come about as a result. Yes, Polk, Manifest Destiny, and the annexation of Texas, which is important for the Mexican War. I don't think you can narrow down the essay topics. That's hard to say. I got to go through these insane ones. Doug is studying. Doug is studying. Do I weigh less than Alfano? I don't know. The Chesapeake colonies, those are the ones, Virginia, Maryland, the Chesapeake area. The Tidewater region, maybe they might ask. Chesapeake, Tidewater, same place. I'm caught up with the questions. Hi, daughter. No, you can relate it. Yeah, no, you can relate. You can relate your synthesis to the present. Absolutely, you can relate your synthesis to before the time period as well. That's a great question. Yeah, you can do synthesis either all the way up till today. Absolutely, but be complete and be detailed. Was the Mexican War a turning point? I would have to say it was, right? Well, whenever you're doing those turning point essays, remember you got to do a T-chart. What changed and what remained the same? So what changes after? Compromise becomes less and less a viable solution to the issues of slavery. The issue of slavery becomes more heated, more violent. What remains the same? The Mexican War, the sectional divide continues. It doesn't solve it. It doesn't cure it. It just intensifies it. I was a beast at Tech Deck. I can't give you a house tour. It's on my laptop. I'm on my desktop. George Washington's foreign policy would be, well, proclamation of neutrality. Stay out of the conflict in Europe with respect to the French Revolution. Stay out of the conflict. That's really important. So the proclamation of neutrality, really controversial at that time, because remember, we had an alliance with France from the American Revolution, and Washington rejects it in favor of neutrality. And the other part that you have to say would be the farewell address, where he kind of laid what people believe he laid out a foundation by which Americans should not engage in alliances and should kind of stay out of any foreign kind of entanglement. So that's definitely a foundational piece of American foreign policy. Whoops, I went too fast. Hold on. Hamilton versus Burr, you don't have to worry about it. That won't be on the test. Definitely Hamilton's financial plan. No, Autumn, you may not write Hamilton lyrics for the essay. Federal judges hold office for life to limit the influence of politics on their decisions. Synthesis, choose something you know very well and then try to tie the essay back to that, some sort of principle. So that's why I think using the city upon a hill and expressing it as an expression of American exceptionalism and then tying the topic to whether or not it's American exceptionalism or not is a good idea. Maybe the Declaration of Independence, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or all men are created equal. Tie it to something like that if you can. Those two ideas. And I would use that all the time, the same ideas. The rooms are going to be posted. I forget what rooms they're in. They'll be posted on the window when you walk in tomorrow, as soon as you walk into the building. Okay, how would you describe the three sections? Well, the North, obviously, that's going to be the factory system, right? You're not going to have slavery. You're going to have immigrants into the North, where there's a lot more economic opportunity than other places. Although many of them are going to start moving west, because that's going to be an area of economic opportunity. Not so much in the South. The South is going to be a plantation economy. The South is going to be cash crop. Cotton. The cotton is cotton kingdom. Cotton is king. Obviously, slavery is important. A much more rigid social class structure in the South. You were either a rich planter or a poor white farmer or a slave, and there wasn't much in between. So that's the South. And the West, for the most part, it's going to be commercial agriculture and a developing region, unlike a more developing region than, say, the North or the South. Another good question. All right. No, you cannot drop out of school. I don't have the. Yeah, I can. Actually, I will send you the room numbers in the remind tomorrow morning when I get to school. I don't have it here. City upon a hill. That comes out of Puritanism, right? Winthrop writes the model of Christian charity, in which he says we want to set up a city upon a hill. We talk about it in class as either being an example or is it a model for other people to look at. So, and the Puritans themselves were trying to create this model perfect society where everyone worked together, where people took care of one another. They were going to be prosperous, and they wanted to, succeed. So they worked very, very hard. They were, that idea of that work ethic. That gives rise to this idea of American exceptionalism. So I think it's easy to tie a lot of these essays to American exceptionalism and the city upon a hill. The pre-revolution stuff, go back over your stuff and talk about the Columbian Exchange. Look at the Columbian Exchange. Look at triangular trade, the importance of that. Remember that the societies that were around before Columbus arrives were complex societies. We did that whole thing on the different societies before Columbus. That's important, that they were complex. They were not these primitive peoples in a lot of ways. And then you should know like the differences between the Chesapeake area and New England, right? The Chesapeake tended to be mostly men. They had gone there. They had different motives, right? They had gone there for gold. They had gone there for economic prosperity. They were mostly men. Economic prosperity. They engaged in agriculture, cash crop agriculture. First tobacco. They started with Indians as workers. Then they used indentured servants, and then finally the slaves. In New England, it tended to be family centered. They went there at first for religious reasons, but they were very engaged in economic prosperity. And there were slaves in the North, not great numbers of them. It wasn't economically viable, except in a state like New York, where they had forms of plantation agriculture or cash crop agriculture, not plantation agriculture. Hey, Victoria. Why are you not studying with the boys? I don't know what they're studying. They're over at Mike's. Do we need to know specific amendments? Not now. Not yet. The significance of the Federalist Papers. Good question. The Federalist Paper helped to promote the passage of the Constitution and ratification of the Constitution. And they had the money to do it. Right? They had the money to produce them and to pay for them. So that's why that was successful. Calhoun, yeah, is he important as an individual? Yeah, he is, but I don't think he's going to be on the exam. Just remember, he was the one who promoted the idea of nullification during Jackson's presidency over the tariff. Bacon's Rebellion, a rebellion of indentured servants. It was crushed. It failed, but historians believe it had an impact on moving more of the people of Virginia and those engaged in cash crop agriculture to look to slaves as an alternative form of laborers, because the indentured servants were becoming less reliable and more unstable. So if you had a permanent workforce, you wouldn't have to worry about them anymore. You're not a pathetic loser. That's a joke. All right. So, Articles of Confederation. Weak central government. U.S. Constitution. Strong central government. Articles of Federation could not raise an army. Constitution, the government can raise an army. The 13 states were allowed to coin their own money. That's not going to be the case under the Constitution. So all the weaknesses of the Articles are corrected in the Constitution. And most importantly, though, a federal system as opposed to a confederation. A federal system meaning that the national government and the state governments both balance power, as opposed to the state governments having so much more power under a confederation. I hope that helps. Oh, power to tax, too. All right, the federal government got the power to tax that they did not have under the Articles of Confederation. No, they're at Michael's. Whoa. I'm way behind here. Hold on a second. What do we know about the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists? Really easy. The Federalists were for the Constitution and a stronger national government. The Anti-Federalists were not. They thought it bent towards monarchy and bent towards tyranny. The Federalists were helped by the Federalist Papers because it was a way of promoting their views. The Anti-Federalists eventually would use the addition of the Bill of Rights as a way of kind of getting... because the Federalists couldn't get everybody to agree to it, the Bill of Rights becomes like the leverage point, so the Anti-Federalists will go along. So the Anti-Federalists go along with the Constitution eventually. You have the ratification, and the Bill of Rights is added later on. Hamilton's financial plan. Another good question. Remember that the financial plan has, I guess you could say, well, we'll do 5 pieces, right? It has the funding of the national debt. We're going to pay off all the national debt. Assumption of the state debt, the national government's going to pay also the debts of the states, the excise tax on whiskey, the tariff, and the creation of the Bank of the United States. There was something else I wanted to say about Hamilton's financial plan. Remember that Hamilton is a federalist, right? So he wants a stronger national government. No, that's Abraham Lincoln behind me. Do you miss iCarly? Of course I do. I miss. What caused the Second Great Awakening? Whoa. I'm back. Hold on 1 second. What caused the Second Great Awakening, and what were the impacts? Well, what caused it were the changes that were brought about by the economic and social changes brought about by the Second Great Awakening. I mean, by the market revolution, and the impacts. It would lead to the antebellum reform movements. It would have an impact on that. All right, it would have somewhat of an impact on it, right? Because a lot of the people who were engaged in the Great Awakening would become the leaders of the reform movements in the antebellum period, abolitionism, women's rights. You know, that whole area in upstate New York where you had the Great Awakening, that hotbed of the Great Awakening, the burned over district, like right along where the Erie Canal was, that's going to be the hotbed of antebellum reform as well. Turn up your volume. I can't. It doesn't work, right? Polk's presidency, like I said before, just Manifest Destiny, Texas annexation, and the Mexican War. The Adams presidency, we did that earlier, but real quick again, you know, the Alien Sedition Acts wants to try to keep us out of the war, so he wants to kind of slow down the opposition or quiet the opposition. The results of the decision in Gibbons versus Ogden. I mean, it's not an important case. Marbury is it is an important case, but Marbury is a more important. I'm not Marbury. Marshall, the Marshall Court is very important, right? The Marshall Court was a federalist court, so it supported business interests and it supported the power of the federal government most of the time. The Marbury case and judicial review, giving the court more power. McCulloch, the bank is constitutional and the bank cannot be taxed. And then the Gibbons case that the federal government, the new federal government controlled interstate commerce. The states didn't, the federal government did. So business interests, federal government, whenever you think of Marshall, think of Hamilton. There won't be anything on the New Jersey plan, the Virginia plan. First year teaching, chalk. War of 1812. Causes and effects, you know, causes, freedom of the issues on the seas, right, with respect to impressment and seizures. In the West, the thought that the British were helping the Indians, so the Westerners and Southerners tended to be for the war. They tended to be the war hawks, and again, the impacts: rise of American nationalism, the market revolution, the one-party system. Andrew Jackson becomes an American hero. Do I comb my beard? What is wrong with you? I miss Vine too. Well, I don't know if he learned anything or reviewed anything, but you guys are having fun in this chat, I can see. Is that Frosty? Am I shouting out to Frosty? Is that who that is? I don't know. It's blue like Frosty. Look, it looks like a snowman. Oh, the compromises. That's a good question. Let's start with the compromise of 1820, right? The Missouri Compromise. That's always a good one. 3630. Missouri comes in enslaved, Maine comes in free, and that's the precedent, right? That's the foundation of the rest of the compromises. Then 1850, that's a great one to talk about because that's a compromise that really doesn't resolve much. It just creates more tension between the two sides, and that's after the Mexican War. So you have the South gets the more strict fugitive slave law, and the North gets the California in as a free state. Neither side is happy, and it just creates. You could make the argument it creates even more tension. Then the 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, you can consider that a compromise as well, and the issue of popular sovereignty. And again, that leads to bleeding Kansas, more violence, more tension. And I guess that's it. That would be on the test. Good question. Difference between Pilgrims and Puritans. Pilgrims were separatists. They wanted to separate from the church completely, from the Anglican Church. The Puritans were, and they came first, the Pilgrims. Smaller numbers because they were more radical. Puritans, non-separatists, came later. They would be the ones who founded Massachusetts Bay. They believed they could purify the church from within. So when we talk about the model of Christian charity and the city upon a hill idea, that's what they were trying to promote. That if they could do it here, then at home in England, the Anglicans in England could do the same thing. Wait, I got to go back. I did the compromises. All right, good. That is Frosty. Matt Correa is not Frosty. Why did George... Well, that's a good question there. Why did George Washington not want political parties? Well, he certainly didn't want the opposition party, right? He was more lean towards the Federalists. You could look at the farewell address two ways. You can look at him being nonpartisan, or you could look at him being a supporter of his own his own principles, right, which were held by the Federalists for the most part. I'm always aware that you are bantering with me, but so do not worry. Now those don't include the compromise. The compromises at the Constitutional Convention are different from the ones that Civil War. So just the Great Compromise leads to a two-house legislature, right? The Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. The Three-Fifths Compromise, every 5 slaves count as 3 people. That's important for representation in the House. And obviously the Electoral College. And those are the main ones you have to know. I don't think they'll ask about that. I don't remember if that's on the test or not. I don't think common sense is on there. Corrupt bargain. That's the claim that Jacksonians made that the election had been stolen from them by Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams. Remember, when Jackson runs for office, he wins the popular vote, he wins the electoral vote, but he doesn't win the presidency. He believes that when they voted in the House of Representatives, there was a corrupt bargain. Not that he believes, but his supporters believe that there was a corrupt bargain between Clay and Adams. And although there's no evidence of it, that's what they believed. The comment section is weird because I don't really get a lot of this stuff. All right. That's it. Good luck tomorrow, and I'll send you those room numbers in the remind if you need them. But you're not going to need them. You can look them up. All right. I think you guys can review this later on. I'm not 100% sure. So I will see you tomorrow. Now if I can figure out how to shut this thing off.